Well, everyone, thank you for being here today, and I'm extremely thrilled and pleased that we have Ms. Stephenie Meyer with us. She is the New York Times best-selling author. These books have kind of created a phenomenon within the young adult market, but I think it's also good to note that it's not only within young adult, but I think there's also an adult crossover appeal. And I think when you look at who we have here today, you know, we have a range from 14 to 34, which I think really kind of covers your fan base. So I'd like to kind of start out there and say, were you surprised writing your first novel, and you're writing for young adults, you're writing for teens, but to look and see that there was that adult crossover appeal, that there were so many fans that are like 20 and up?
I wasn't really writing thinking, I'm writing a YA novel. I'm going to think about what a 16-year-old wants to read, and I'll write that. I was writing it just for me. I wasn't going to show anyone this. And I was 29 at the time. So to me, it seems really natural that I have this little group of 30-somethings, you know, and that just seems, of course, because that's who I was really writing it for.
Yeah.
I don't think high school is something that you ever really get over, unfortunately. I mean, some ways it's good, some ways it's not, but that's something everyone can go back to really easily in their heads.
I have a question about the writing of Twilight. You said that you had a dream that was the meadow scene. And how did the whole story in the world of Twilight evolve from around that? Like, where did the idea of vampires and, you know, Bella and Edward and their story develop from that?
See, and I wish I could answer that question better, because it'd be nice to say this is how it works, but I don't know why I was dreaming about vampires, because I certainly hadn't read or watched anything about them. And then I didn't know where the story was going. I didn't have an outline. I sat down, I wrote out that scene that just had captured I couldn't think about anything else. You know, here was this guy and he was in love with her, but he wanted to kill her, and I was just so caught up in that. And then when I finished that scene, and I was just going to write it so I wouldn't forget it, then I was like, okay, but what would have happened next? And how would they have gone about their lives from that point on? And I just started writing, and I didn't know what I was going to write next. It wasn't like I said, and I'm going to get to this scene, and then I'll get to this one. No, I was just writing it, and just kind of came at the time, which is so much fun, but just never happens again. That's a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
So I've always been curious, what was your life like before Twilight ever came to your dream world?
It was a lot the same as it is now, and then completely different. It kind of changes, because some days I'm doing this, and then other days it's just the same. I'm at home with my kids like usual. When I wrote Twilight, just before that, I was, you know, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have my 3 little boys. We were potty training, which was not fun, and everything was really normal. I was not thinking, gosh, I wish I could write a book, or I really wish that I could sit down and start a new career. It was not the way my mind was working, and so it really was a black and white. One day I was not a writer, the next day I was, which is not the way it usually works. And I dug back through some of my old journals and stuff. I found one place in 2nd grade, 3rd choice on my list of things I wanted to be when I grew up. It was ballet dancer, which didn't happen, paleontologist, and then writer. And so it never was a first place priority for me. I think it's funny how it just, you know, obviously I must have been wanting that outlet, because once I found it, it was so much fun. Everything revolved around that. I can't go see a movie because it's like 3 hours away from my computer. I can't do that. And so it's such a huge part of my life. It's hard to imagine my life without it now. But back then, it was just, I mean, I scrapbooked. there wasn't a lot. I had a lot more free time, I think. Mostly it was just kids. 3 kids are quite a career.
Yeah, I bet.
How did Twilight become from being your secret that only you and your sister were going to read to being published?
Well, there were kind of 2 factors. One was the shock of having finished what I then had to realize was an actual book. I mean, I didn't know how Word pages translate into actual pages, but this was pretty long. You know, I knew it was a good size thing, and I had finished it. It was complete, and I've never finished anything in my life. I was like, I wrote a whole book. And then the other thing was my sister, who, if she had lived in Arizona, probably would have physically kicked me. She's like, you have to do it. Just send it out to someone. And then I started looking at it. It's hard. You have to go through agents, and you have to send out these horrible queries that are just a nightmare to try and summarize. I dare anyone to summarize Twilight in 10 sentences and not make it sound like a bad episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's impossible. And so that was really hard, but I still don't know where I got the courage from, because it's not my usual thing. I think I was meant to be doing this, and so I had a little extra help, because it's not my usual personality at all.
Well, my friend brought me Twilight and said, you need to read this book. And I said, well, what's it about? And she goes, it's about vampires. And I went, yeah, I don't know about that. That's not typically what I read. And she goes, no, seriously, you have to read this.
The vampire thing is hard. How many of you were into vampire books? Because there's.
I didn't know it was about vampires.
See, and that's my hardest thing to say is when people say, what's it about? And which should be easy for an author. And I just have to say, ugh, it's about vampires, there's romance. And you just know they're going to cringe. They always do.
Everything's a token.
Oh yeah.
A couple of people will say, oh, I love
describe
vampires,
it.
that's why I picked it up. But most people, it's not really a vampire thing.
Yeah,
so.
no.
See, I usually preface that before I hand it off to someone saying, it's about vampires, but it's really not. It's more about the relationship and the romance. So
I always say, it's not like it sounds. That's a hard part. But so nobody here was a real vampire fan.
No.
I was. I was into Buffy and all that.
That was my favorite show for like years. I like watched every episode.
See, and I've never seen it, but my sister, the one who got to read Twilight when no one else did, she was, and I didn't know that, she had kept that her dark secret. So when I told her that it was about vampires, she's like, oh, I love that. I'm like, you do? We're both just shocked with each other, but I can't watch Buffy now because I can't watch anything vampires because it messes me up.
No,
Because you have your own idea and concept of it, which makes sense.
You don't want to see something that's too close and think, oh my gosh, everyone's going to think I ripped this off. I mean, even if they think that, I don't want to know they're thinking that.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, do you? I know that there are people who are hardcore Edward and who are hardcore Jacob. Have you met any that love both? Or
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There are people, most people, you know, I would say 50% are Edward and nothing else. And then you have about 30%, 40% that Edward's the best, but Jacob's still pretty nice. And you have like 10% that, you know, they're kind of torn. And then, you know, 0.5% that love Jacob. And they're a small crowd, but they're very loyal.
My mom is
I
the
finally
Jacob.
got her to read the books. She absolutely hates Edward. I was like, what? That was the first thing I asked when she read it. So what do you think about Edward? I hate him. He's horrible.
Is it because he's like a century plus older than Bella?
She just thinks he's a creep. I was like, no, but she's absolutely in love with Jacob.
Boys tend to like Jacob better. I think they can identify with him, the idea of being the underdog, no pun intended, and you know, just not being perfect. And that's one of the reasons I love him, is because he says stupid things sometimes, and he doesn't always think through what he's going to do. And Edward's so careful, and Jacob just messes up all the time. And for me, that's really endearing. But
Edward's such a gentleman. That's why
he
too.
is.
Right, but you can see where Bella is sort of torn between the two because Jacob is more reality than, even though he is a werewolf, he has that more grasp on humanity than Edward does.
He does have a more human feel.
She always describes as the angel. So
well, Jacob's very earthy. He is realistic, and I'll have people say, "Is there really an Edward out there?" And it's like, no. For that, it's not gonna be a pleasant journey. But keep your eyes open for Jacob, because there are a couple of those. There's very few of them, but he's fantastic. If you can find a Jacob, you're really doing well. Edward, no. Nobody's that good luck.
Edward is so mature. I mean, he has lived life, and Jacob is so new, and he acts like a teenager, and he is a teenager, and
so it really parallels Bella, I think, because
Absolutely.
I mean, with what Edward's been through and what he's seen, he does have that sophistication because of his age, and then you've got Bella and Jacob both going through the same teen angst, even though she does love Edward. You know, so they're going through it almost together.
Exactly. I actually wanted them to kiss when they were in the kitchen right before the phone rang. I wanted it, even though I want her to be with Edward, but I just wanted them to have that little moment.
You know, there's a lot of people who say they were screaming no right then.
They're so against it, but I was like, no, I kind of wanted it.
That was a really fun scene to write. It was, you know, just right there on the edge, and you're like, okay, are they going to kiss? And the phone's going to ring. Dang, you know.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it would have been fun to see that.
What I think also is amazing is the online perspective. So when I was younger and reading, never did I have the accessibility to an author. Or you could write a letter, but unless you talk to your friends, you had a hard time expressing, you know, just what that author meant to you, or, you know, like Judy Blume, something along those lines. And you can go online now and see the YouTube book trailers, and you can go on to Twilight Lexicon, and you can see the blogs. So the accessibility that readers have these days with the authors just amazes me. And how do you look at that phenomenon, look at the love that they have for you and these characters in the series? And
it's really overwhelming. I think the coolest thing, though, is not the accessibility to me, but the accessibility to each other. Because I didn't have that. When I was reading Anne McCaffrey, I had my sister, and we would sit there and go, oh my gosh, I love this, and she'd say, I love this. If I could have gotten online, if that had existed back in the Stone Age, I could have found like 40 people who would sit there and we could all talk about it, and I would have probably written fan fiction about Anne McCaffrey stuff because I was so in love with it. To be able to find other people to talk about your obsessions with
I have friends all over the country, in other countries. I have friends in Norway and Texas and Florida. Yeah.
It's
I know
amazing.
we spoke to this earlier, but it crosses ages. And just sitting here with you folks, it really feels like a connection. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
I've had really good luck with everyone that I've met. You know, I was worried going in. I had an interview with a library, and they said, "Are you worried about Christian backlash?" Because Harry Potter was just going through people saying it's evil. And I said, you know, I'm not really worried about Christians as much as I'm about vampire fans. I mean, they seem a little scarier to me. I have never met anybody with the book. You know, maybe the little girl who hates Jacob, but she was sweet. She really was. But everybody has been so cool, and we seem to get each other. And I think they've put enough of myself in the book that people who really get it, enough to fly out to an event or drive out to Forks or something, people who get it that much, we get along really well. So I've just had so much fun. I've made so many friends through this all over the world. I have friends in Spain now, and I have friends in Slovakia. If that's not the coolest thing in the world, I don't know what is.
Have the blogs and chat rooms had any influence on the way your stories have been written?
No, because my stories were mostly done before Twilight ever came out. I mean, I was finished with the rough draft of Eclipse before Twilight came out. And I had that sequel that I just can't escape. You know, the first one that I wrote that I called Forever Dawn, and it was cheesy, but I laid out the future of where the characters were going to go, and a lot of things have changed, but a lot of things have stayed the same. So it hasn't affected at all where the story's going, which is probably good, because it's hard sometimes to read people saying, "Oh, I really wish this would happen in book 3," and think, "Oh, it's not going to," and that poor person's going to be disappointed. Sure. And so I'm glad I have them all set in stone, though. It'd probably be hard not to be influenced. I think it would be hard.
But I also think as readers, we love the characters so much that we have faith that the author's taking them to where they are going to go. I mean,
I hope so. I hope people feel that way. It's hard sometimes because, you know, Belle and Edward, they feel like they belong to me, but then they feel like they belong to other people too, and I don't want to disappoint those people who love them. I don't think I will. I think that the characters all really stay true to themselves. So it'll be interesting to see. I am anxious for Eclipse to come out. I do want to see the whole thing. And I think the quote of the day, a secondary fun thing about that I didn't realize is how much fun it's going to be for you guys to find out where the quotes actually are. And you'll be reading through, you go, "Oh, that's what it meant." And it's going to add a whole nother layer. So I'm really excited to see how that goes over too.
Like what time of day, like with your kids and all, like what time of the day that works best for you to writing?
For me, it's mostly at night because that's when they're asleep, and that works really well with vampires. Not so good with getting enough sleep. But for me, the writing process is really evolving. When I wrote Twilight, I wrote it from chapter 13 to the end, and then the beginning to catch up, which I thought would take like 4 chapters, and it took 12, which is very much how I write. Everything takes longer than I think. And then with New Moon and Eclipse, I just was bouncing around between scenes that I like best, and I really like that style of writing. Of writing, but then when I was working on my science fiction novel, I wrote it chronologically straight through, which is horrible because you get to a stopping point and you can't break through it.
Yeah, I hate those.
It's really hard. And then with Eclipse, you know, I just say, okay, well, I'll work on something else now. But ever since I did that, I'm having the hardest time breaking out of it. So now I'm writing chronologically and not liking it, but I have been able to kind of push through the hard spots. But it's really fun. If you ever wanted to try it, I highly recommend just writing. You have to have kind of an outline when you work that way. You do have to have an outline. And just start with this scene's going to be the most exciting, so I'll write it. And then I'm going to go back and do this one. And then I'll get this one and that one. And it's fun. It's really a fun way to write.
How much do you usually write at a time? Like, do you write a whole page or a couple of pages, or?
It's entirely dependent on the day and what my kids are going to let me do and what else is going on in life. But on a good day, I can get a chapter done. Okay. And with the first day with Twilight, I wrote the whole chapter 13. I just sat down and pounded it out. That's a really good day. Mostly, when I'm really in the writing groove, I get 5 or 6 pages a day.
The music you listen to influence the way you write?
You know, I don't know if it does or if it's that I put on things that fit the mood of what I'm writing. I mean, with Twilight, it was all Linkin Park. I had Meteora and Hybrid Theory in an endless loop over and over again. And after a while, it becomes background music. But the thing about Linkin Park is they're great for action scenes because they have that driving beat and it kind of keeps you going. With book 2, of course, completely different mood. I was listening to Muse the whole time, and like Marjorie Fair and all this other really depressing. I mean, Muse isn't depressing, but I was listening to the really like, you know, everything is over and why should I keep living?
I thought about Placebo, especially Med CD. That makes me think of New Moon a lot.
I didn't discover Placebo until I was working on book 3, and there will be a Placebo song on the soundtrack for that one that fit in so well. I heard it when I was in Washington. I was like, oh my gosh, this goes with that scene. I love it when that happens. I love finding songs, but I think I just tend to pick music that fits the mood of what I'm working on. Action scenes, you have to have some good, strong beat. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. I can't write without music.
So we're going to find out more about Jasper in the next book, you said?
Yes.
Because I'm really curious.
There have been a lot of stories that have been kind of waiting. You know, Rosalie.
I know.
And
I
she gets
that.
to tell it in her own words, and so does Jasper. So you get to hear it from their perspective, which is nice. And you know, I wanted to do it that way. Edward could have told us what their lives were like. He could have told Bella, but that's not fair. You know, they need their chance to say it in their words.
The last time I read Twilight last week, I was reading through, and that's when I realized we don't know anything about Rosalie. I was reading it, and I was like, you know what? We don't know anything about her except that she was meant for Edward.
Yeah, I've read a lot of speculation about Rosalie, and to me, it seems really like obvious. Like, of course, this would be Rosalie's backstory. It makes sense. It fits all her character traits into it. But no one's ever gotten it. Not that I've seen. So maybe somebody has, and they'll say, "Oh, I had it right. Look," but I haven't seen it yet. And to me, it seems really obvious. So we'll see if after you read it. I just can't imagine it happening any other way. So we'll see.
Do we get more on Alice in the next book too? Because she's my favorite Cohen other than Edward.
Oh, Alice is always a part of the story. You know, she's the one I can't stay away from for more than 5 seconds. You know, Alice has to be a part of everything because she's so much fun. She makes me laugh.
I love her.
The characters that make me laugh most. Alice is always cracking me up. Jacob makes me laugh all the time. He's so funny. And a lot of what he thinks isn't in there. But I know what he's thinking, and it's really funny, trust me. He's just such a little smart aleck, you know. I love that. So it's fun to have I like the funny stuff. It really makes it work for me better. So I'm glad that this book, more of that, got to come out.
Back to Rosalie, will we get more of her background in the Eclipse?
Yes, you get her whole story.
Oh, that's good.
And it's fun. When I get to have them tell it themselves, then I get to be narrating for them, and looking at the world through Rosalie's perspective is a really interesting way. I did a little bit of Rosalie on my website. Because so many people were curious about that conversation between her and Alice. They wanted both sides.
That little extra.
And to put myself in her shoes and look at the world her way, because I do not understand the world as it looks to someone who's always been the most beautiful person in the world. You know, that is not something that computes with me. I don't know how to see things that way, and to have your world shaped around the way you look is an interesting concept. So I had fun with that. I don't know. I had one letter once from a girl who said how much she identified with Rosalie and how she really appreciated that character. And I was thinking, oh my God, that frightens me. I didn't know there really were people like that. And oh wow, you know, Bella I find much more easy, you know. Just little girl with brown hair, I can understand that.
It's easy to identify Bella. That's one of the things about the books, though. Is that you guys agree? Like when you read it, do you like take that person?
Yeah.
You're almost. It's like you're falling in love with Edward, and you're heartbreaking because he's gone. And then you're super excited because he's back. And
exactly. But then on the other hand, you don't really think about, you know, like Rosalie or anything. And then towards the second book, you start to.
I know you realize that she's there, and she
she's
still
there,
doesn't
and
like you.
You kind of wonder about what's going on with her at the same time.
For me in Twilight, my feelings were set in stone about Rosalie. I didn't like her. She was a little snob. But when Bella was talking about her mortality, and Rosalie was like, well, it's because you have a choice, I kind of felt some more compassion for her because she does care for Bella.
Exactly.
But she doesn't want to show it because she wants to be human still. So I like that about Rosalie.
Rosalie has a lot of unhappiness, you know, and that comes out in most people I know who are unhappy are not very nice to people around them because you can't be. It's really hard to be nice when you're miserable. And so, you know, it's interesting. I still wouldn't call her to go out to a movie. I'd call Alice. You know, but I do understand her. I have sympathy for her, but you know, she's not somebody you'd want to hang out with as much as some of the other characters.
Yeah, on identifying with characters, I know that I find my friends and, you know, other people that I've talked to through, you know, the lexicon and things, talking about, you know, oh, well, this person is just like, you know, Bella or like Rosalie, and it's so neat to be able to identify with these characters that you've created.
I think a couple of people ask me if I know these people, and like I took a character, and there's just a few that are actually based on reality. And it's people like, you know, Jessica and Lauren, because we all know Jessica's and Lauren. And I know a couple of really great Angelas, which is nice. But so it's more the human people. The vampires are more kind of their own thing. But
you know Mike?
I do know Mike. And
Eric?
Yes. Oh, lots of Erics. Lots of Erics. And then with the wolves, my brother Paul. You know, I named a lot of characters in the second book because Jacob was in there, but I actually named Jacob after a kid I met when I was 14 who left me with a big impression. He was Navajo Indian, and that was sort of my love affair with Native Americans at that point started. I've always found them just fascinating, the history and everything. And so I had this character named Jacob who was named after that boy that I met. But my brothers and sisters are like, how come Jake gets his name in here and we don't? So everybody's name had to go in. So I named one of the characters Paul, and he was not his personality hadn't really been developed yet. And once I named him Paul, he became Paul. And now my brother's mad. He's like, oh, thanks a lot, Steph. I'm so glad that I'm the werewolf with the temper problem. It's like, wonder where I got that from, Paul. No, but he's great. He did the whole motorcycle scene for me. I don't know how to ride a motorcycle. And he sat down, and the way he described it was so, I felt like I had a ride on a motorcycle. So Paul, you should probably be writing. It was really amazing. So brothers are great. They help you write male characters really well.
I was just going to ask, is Alice your sister?
No, Alice, I wish I knew an Alice, because she is, I guess, the dream best friend. She's what everybody wants for a best friend. No, my sister's kind of like Esme. She's so sweet, And so, I have 2 sisters, and they both have their own little personalities. My younger sister got to be the vampire with sex appeal. She got to be Heidi, which is nice. She likes that. But Emily actually is kind of like her namesake too. Emily Young in the novels is also kind of a very sweet person.
When you did the scene with the blood typing in the first one, like when you made Bella start showing the queasiness of blood, was that like an intentional thing that's going to come back later, like throughout all the books?
When I was writing the first of Twilight, again, remember, no one was ever going to see this but me and Emily. This is my dark secret. My husband didn't know about this. This was completely me. So I was having fun. Biology room, actually, that was autobiographical. I did pass out when I didn't even prick my finger, because I wouldn't. And everybody around would be like, ew, look. And I just zonk right on the table. So I didn't have a vampire rescue me, sadly. But that one, actually, I do have blood issues, which is probably why I ended up writing about vampires, because I have bigger reactions to blood than most people. Although I'm not like Bella completely, but I do
with the
get
smell,
sick.
is that what you got? The smell, like that's what you think it smells like?
Well, it's kind of the mental thing. Like, needles, yeah. You get over that. You have a couple kids, they stick all these huge needles in you. You get past it. But as a teenager, I had problems. So notice no holes in my ears.
Is that going to be an issue then in the next book?
You know what? It's not a real central issue to it. No. It's not something that comes up too much. I think there's one queasy scene.
Well, we're just thinking, like, if Bella turns, how is she going to deal with the blood issue?
I've seen a ton of speculation on that. And, for me, that never really occurred to me, because it's such a different thing. You are not human anymore. You are another creature at that point, and you survive on blood. So it never occurred to me that, ooh, Bella wouldn't want to suck blood. Well, she'd be a vampire. I don't think there'd be a problem there, The problem would be not doing it, I think.
Now that we've, all read, what the consequences and everything are, what do you want to happen? Do you want Bella to turn?
I'm kind of torn.
Yeah.
At first, I absolutely wanted it. Like when I was reading that last page in Twilight, I was like, oh, did it happen? And then I reread it. I was like, no, he didn't do it. And so when I read New Moon, though, I was like, maybe I don't want her to change.
Yeah, I'd miss clumsy Bella.
Graceful Bella does not sound the same as clumsy Bella.
Yeah. And then I wondered how it would affect their relationship if she was a vampire and she didn't have all of her human moments that he's so infatuated with.
You also really have to think about, because didn't he turn Rosalie, that Rosalie kind of drifted away from him too. So
would
Carlisle changed Rosalie.
Oh, did he?
Carlisle
my bad.
Edward has never. It's a really difficult thing to do. It's not easy. Carlisle's the only one who really has the self-control. But Rosalie didn't so much drift away. They never got along. Day one, first thing Edward said drove her crazy. So you'll get to see that. That she doesn't like him very much from the very first time. She loves him like a brother, but they have never gotten along. They have personalities that do not mesh well.
Does everyone agree with Carlisle that, if Edward were to turn Bella, that, do you think that his soul would be redeemable? Would he get that back or can make up for it?
I think he still has a soul, but he just doesn't see that. He has to have the soul to have compassion and stuff like that, but I don't know why he doesn't think he has one. He has the soul to love Bella as much as he does when her blood calls to him.
Souls are tricky because, everybody has a different definition of what they are. And for him, he has a really old school, how he was raised in the early, 1900s. A soul is something that, vampires could not possibly have, because obviously they're evil. So he just sees the world that way, and it takes quite an adjustment. Well, Bella makes him adjust everything, He has to change everything for her.
Now, with Midnight Sun, from Edward's perspective, which, again, those of us at work, when we read both books, we were both enthralled. And then somebody went on your website and said, oh my God, you have to go on Stephenie Meyer's website. She's rewritten the first chapter of Twilight. It's from Edward's perspective. Everybody get on there. And it just, the buzz, I mean, we sent emails alike. And again, it was just amazing because, you know, Edward constantly in both books tries to tell Bella, I'm a monster, I'm a monster. You really shouldn't be near me. There's danger, there's danger. And we as readers, at least I felt, oh yeah, there probably is, you know, but it's love. It's all about love. And then you see it from his perspective and what he thought when he first saw her, and then what he had planned to do in the biology class. And then you really get a sense of, there really is a monster in there. And I may get the line wrong, but the line was, the monster in the mirror mocked me. So there's that line for him where he doesn't want to be that monster, but it was just enthralling to see that there was that rage inside of him.
Well, and as soon as you read that chapter too, you really felt the depth.
Yes.
And I went back and reread the books immediately.
Yeah. Probably made more sense after you read the first chapter.
Yeah,
that's what he was going through. I understand now.
And what a challenge he had. It was lovely, yeah.
Yeah, it made me think of Twilight in a different perspective, because I did go back and reread and think, well, if he was thinking this here, what was he thinking here and here and here?
And I read that now. When I reread Twilight, I'm like, I wonder what Edward's point of view is right here. I was doing that last week. I was like, oh.
I was doing that with the chapter where he was in the car and he was listening, and I was like, you know, I wonder if he was really in the car or if he was out driving somewhere and he just, you know,
so
fast. Like, yeah, it's like, you know, I really just wondered.
And do you do that with any of your other characters too? Like for New Moon, Jacob, like there's so many things.
With Jacob.
Oh, okay. I did a shorter thing. It's a big commitment to take it from another character's perspective. I can do it for just about anyone. If you give me a scene, I know what everyone's thinking. All of my side characters are really, really important to me, and every line they say, to me, it matters a lot. You know, it's not so much other people, and it's very easy to X them out, but it's like, oh, but this was important, you know. As a writer, I think you just do that. But with Edwards, I know him so well. We're actually more alike personality-wise than Bella and I are. And so I really I mean, he sees the world in a very, this is right, this is wrong, this is a line I can't cross. And Twilight is all about him crossing a line that's extremely important to him that he not cross. And so he's very torn up. And I felt really bad when people were, when I first started reading fan fiction, which I don't do anymore, I didn't know what it was, and there were like 30 stories online, which is not unmanageable, and I was like, really? They're writing from my character's perspective? How interesting. And then all these Edwards are just like, it's so easy. I'm like, they have no idea. It's not fair. And I started feeling like, you know, Edward's not getting his due, and that's where the idea first came to me. I don't think I'll do that for another character to that extent.
Right.
But it is fun to switch off sometimes and think through the different thoughts. And I did do a little bit on Jacob just because to me, it blows my mind that people could think that Jacob has some kind of ulterior motive or that he's this sinister character. But some people were reading him that way, and I was just shocked because to me, he's so open and innocent. And so I had to go through and just give a little bit of his perspective. Not that it stops people from still thinking he's sinister. If you want to, you can think that.
I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I want him to die in this next book. Why?
I got this sweet little girl in Connecticut, and she comes up and I'm signing books. She's like, I'm worried about Jacob in the next book. And I said, oh, honey, don't worry. I love Jacob. She goes, no, I want you to kill him. I'm just like, oh, you know, how can you want me? Oh, that's so mean. And then I kind of wanted to write something mean in her book. How can you not love Jacob? But you know, everybody brings into it their own thing, and some people are so in love with Edward that they really have the blinders on.
Oh, I'm completely in love with Edward, but I like Jacob still.
I like people who can appreciate both, because to me they're two very different things.
Yeah.
You know, and Bella's mature for her age, and Edward kind of touches that part of her, and then Jacob lets her be a kid again, and so I like her being able to have kind of both options.
Through the editing process, what is like your favorite scene that you had to give up that you didn't want to out of both books?
You know, editing is always a killer, and every line you feel like you didn't put anything in there just for fun. Generally, it had a reason, and so when someone puts an X through it, and you think, oh, but wait, isn't this going to affect something later? And it usually does, which makes you have to. Oh, the editing is hard. One of the things that I always have missed is Evil Phil. Because originally, Phil was not the guy that, I mean, now I can't even, I wish he'd changed his name, because Good Phil is so, I mean, he's just, I love Good Phil, you know, he's really cool. And I'm glad that he's with Renee, because Evil Phil wasn't, you know, not as good for her to be with. But when I was writing the beginning of this, in my head I'm thinking, okay, By chapter 6, well, by chapter 3, we're going to be in Fantasyland. And I didn't know that on the back of the novel, it was going to come out and say Edward was a vampire right there on the back. Yeah. That wasn't what I was planning. So I kind of want people to be really grounded and feel like this is people I know and situations I've been in and I understand. So when Bella has to go live with her father, originally, I had 3 friends in high school whose moms got remarried. Every single one of them, there were issues with the stepfather because you have a pretty 17-year-old girl in the house and a stepfather. There's just awkwardness. And none of it ever turned anything horrible, but it is. And one of them moved in with her father because she just felt a little off. And so for me, originally, Phil was a lot older than Renee. He was Bella's high school principal. And he just made her uncomfortable. And she didn't want her mom to figure that out. She felt really bad. She knew if Renee figured out that Phil was making her uncomfortable, Renee would probably leave him or do something drastic because that's how she was. And she didn't want to make her mother was happy with Phil. So that's why she left. And it made the first conversation with Bella and Edward a lot more intense, because he picked up on that when no one else ever had. And actually had this moment where he kind of wanted to kill Phil, which I thought was funny. So I missed that. And you end up sacrificing things like that when you edit. You do miss a lot of scenes, but then you get to write new ones. And my little editing thing that I think probably drives my editors crazy is, they get this book and it's so long, like, okay, we're gonna cut this down. And so I do all the cuts, but then I'm adding things in and it always ends up longer than it started every time. I always loved long books. When I was a kid, I would pick the one off the shelf by the size of the spine. I didn't want something that was going to be over right away, so I read Gone with the Wind when I was like 8 because it was the biggest one.
When I originally picked up Twilight, that's why I picked it up. It wasn't because of the anything like that. I was going on vacation. And I wanted something to read that would last me. So I picked it up and I actually started reading it 4 days before I left for vacation because I ran out of stuff to read. I was like, I won't finish it. It's 500 pages long. I was done with it 2 days later.
Because no, the book literally takes you into its world and makes you sit and read it.
You're completely stuck in.
Exactly.
I couldn't put it down.
It's tantalizing. It just is. It just grabs you and makes you read it.
I actually listened to Twilight, and I remember because I have a long commute, and I took the CDs in the house with me so that I could finish listening to it because I was so engrossed in it.
See, and I can't even listen to the audio. I mean, it's beautiful, and Ileana has a gorgeous voice. I got to sit in on some of the recording, which was so cool. But when I listen to someone else read it, I hear all the mistakes. Like, I should have said that way, and that sentence is just a little bit off in the bounce. It drives me insane. I can't, for my sanity's sake, listen to other people read it because I hear every mistake that I made, and it's just, oh.
Well, I prefer, like, my own voice in my head because, like, when I do it, like, I hear the explanations, like, different, and, like, it's just, it's good to listen to it. It's just, I'd rather hear my own voice, like, in how I pictured they would sound.
What advice do you have for aspiring authors?
Well, I think the main thing is if you love to write, then you're a writer. If you want to have written a novel, maybe you should give up. Because I notice a lot of people say, oh, I've always wanted to have written a book, have it done. It's not the writing process they're interested in. They want to be an author and to do tours, and that's not the good part. The good part is the writing. And if that's what you love, if you love telling yourself stories, then keep at it. And it doesn't matter. You know what? If no one had ever read Twilight, if I'd never been published, I would still be working on book 4 right now, because that's the good part, is the writing of it. So as long as you love it, you are a writer. And if you want to publish it, think about that later. Finish it first. That's really good advice. Do not get worked up about the publishing process until you're done, because there's too much, right, that's the good part, and then worry about it. But if you love it, you already are an author.
Well, Stephenie, thank you so much for coming today and sitting down.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to get to talk to other people who believe in Edward and Bella too. Makes it real.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. They want me to go to Argentina. It's like for everything that people say, I don't know. That's kind of scary for me. So, Pancho, of course, my husband's like, well, he speaks Spanish, so it's easy for him. When we were in Spain, how easy was that? I don't know if it has bad film or not. I hope not.
Tattoos in there. I brought him home, and he's like, I want him. Put him on me. So he had one Bella right here, Newman right here, and the flower right. 19.
I wanted to have. I didn't realize it like 2 nights ago. Hindsight, but there are some boys. In fact, in Europe, the boys are a lot more comfortable with it. They don't worry that someone, that's a girl's book. They don't even think that way. And so there were tons of boys that read it, and it was really interesting for me to see the difference of. And they love Jacob. The guys love Jacob.
Pretty much all the guys we know, they don't read books. Yeah. So they're like,
they don't know what book is.
What's that?
Do you think when Edward's perspective comes out, like that will introduce more boys?
I wonder. He's pretty obsessed with Bella, and I don't know if guys will identify with that or be like, I don't think about girls that way,
Yeah. Same thing with like bands
movies
or that.
Yeah,
I decided I want to get the Spanish version of Twilight so I can read it because I'm a Spanish major in college, so I want to get the Spanish version and read it.
The Spanish version actually has